Welcome back. Today I'm working on this 1973 Ford 3000 tractor, and what I'm going to be doing is resealing this lift plate cover. Now I've already done a few things before turning the camera on. I've disconnected the lift arms, which this one I disconnected a little bit different because the pin is seized in there, so I just disconnected it on the other angle. I've disconnected the rocker shaft to the draft control, and I've removed the plate. Now if you have the factory blocking plate without a hydraulic adapter on it, you probably don't need to actually pull that off. The reason I had to remove this was my aftermarket hydraulic takeoff covers these two bolts, which do hold the plate down to the transmission. Before you start taking something like this apart, one of the things you want to do is make sure that there is no dirt that is going to fall into the tractor. So you want to make sure you clean all these different areas around here, and if it's like this one that spent 50 years in a field and not necessarily been cleaned ever, there's a fair amount of that to do. So I've got this one cleaned up pretty good. I'll still be careful as I'm taking it apart, but I'm going to go ahead. I think we're down to basically removing these 12 bolts and lifting the cover off to see what's in here. Now, if you do have the blocking plate still on yours, the two bolts here also hold the cover down. So you'll have to remove these two bolts, but you can leave the center and the two over here in. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull these bolts out. Okay, now I'm just going to pry up on this back, which may not be the best thing to do, but it's what I'm doing to try to break this seal. Now this is going to be a heavy and somewhat cumbersome piece, so you want to have a place in mind where you're going to set it that it will be clean and safe. And even with that, still might not be easy to do. Well, that is not attached. It looks like right down in here, that I believe would be the return filter, which wasn't even necessarily the one I was worried about. But I've also got a spring assembly that's broken, which probably used to hold this. Yep. So yeah, that would have sat like that. That bracket would have held it in place. And none of that is happening because, well, it's wrecked. So there's something I wasn't really planning on fixing, but I'm gonna have to. So the spring that's broken actually connects in with the this piece here hits the This hits the level control on the 3-point hitch. There's our piece of spring. How it landed up there and didn't break stuff, I don't know. So I'm just going to pull this out. So this would be a return filter. It filters the fluid before it comes back in to the system, which it also looks like it's pretty well destroyed. So for right now, I think I'm going to have to run to the parts store and before they close and see if I can find a spring. That spring that I pulled out connected from this wire, or from this, that spring that I pulled out connected from this arm, which is the draft control, down to the return filter, which is kind of a weird idea, but it's broken off. You can see the tab is right down here. That's where it's broke off of. So I'll have to pull that out, weld up that bracket and mount, and kind of go from there. Now down in, back underneath, is the pickup filter, which I wanted to replace, but it actually looks really clean, so I might not mess with that. Alright, so I'm ready to put the top cover back on now. I've already got this filled with fluid. Mainly because I didn't want to dump it in through the rear end. That's all the fluid I have on hand, and it's like right at the fill plug. So that'll be enough to start it up and make sure the pump is working, that kind of stuff. I'll actually have to add a little bit more later once we get the hydraulic system primed and all that. But this is all I have on hand right now. What I did off camera, I took this valve apart, made sure everything is working properly in that. I welded up the return hose, installed it back together, put several new O-rings throughout the system. I've got 2 new O-rings on this feed pipe. I've got 2 new O-rings on the main feed pipe down there. I gave up on replacing the intake filter. I really didn't want to pull the PTO out of this right now. It's not leaking, and I figured if I could leave it alone, that would be better. I also replaced some O-rings in the actual lift plate itself. This is not an easy job for one person, but I think I'm going to be able to get it installed here by myself. I've got the gasket down. I've got the gasket surfaces cleaned on both sides. So I'll go ahead and try to grab that plate and see what happens. So not only is this thing heavy, which is part of the issue, it's also incredibly awkward to move by yourself. So there we are, it's set down. Line up those bolt holes there. Time to put these back in. There are actually, it looks like at least 3 different length bolts. The longest of them are going to go around here. Into the 4 spots. Into these 4 spots for sure. And then what you can kind of do is you can kind of put these in and not really start them. And you'll see, like, they will all stick out. Actually, this one's too low. See, this is too short of a bolt. It's probably for back here. And then you've got roughly the same amount sticking out in all of these areas. Oh, too short. There's that one. Short ones go up here in the front. The one with this washer was holding the taillight harness in place, which is what runs through this little tube. So now we'll just kind of go through and start all the fasteners by hand. I know all the reality shows on repair use impacts to drive everything down. I don't. I want to feel if there's an issue with something going together that I'm going to torque, which I haven't looked up spec on this yet, but I'm probably going to torque these all. So the spec that Ford gives you for these is 70 to 85 foot-pounds. I'm going to go with 75. I'm going to start on one of these smaller, easier to replace bolts, because that seems like quite a bit for a bolt this size. Alright, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we'll go ahead and reinstall our lift cover. Which, as you can see, these 2 bolts are obstructed by the plate here. Okay, the torque spec for these bolts is 24 to 31. So I'm going to go with 31 on these. This little guy here in the center, this is 14 to 17 foot-pounds. So we'll just go ahead and give that a nice 15 right there. And that should be all good to go there. Now I'll hook up my hoses and we'll bleed the system. Alright, so this is the hydraulic pump. There's lines that are going to be kind of in your way, but there is a Allen screw on the side of this pump that you use to bleed the hydraulic system on one of these Ford 3000s. This one is a 5/16 or 8 millimeter. I'm assuming it's factory, but what you're going to do is go ahead and pull that out. Set a drain pan directly under it, and maybe I shouldn't have done that because it seems like there was fluid there, but we're going to crank the engine until fluid comes out. You're not really supposed to start the engine, and maybe that's this pump getting a little bit weak, but it really doesn't seem to want to pick up fluid unless you do. So now that we've got that done, we've got fluid in the suction line up to the pump. Now we can run the tractor, run the hydraulics, and see where we're at there. Alright, now before I did this, there was an audible snapping noise in these lines, which is not there anymore. So I think we're at least on the right track. There's probably some air in here. I'm sure I'm gonna have to work this back and forth a little bit to get rid of that. But I think that's about it. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.